The things that have been said this morning. We come back to the same basic thing that I keep questioning. We elect, supposedly, intelligent people to Congress, and we get these laws that they get passed, and all of a sudden, it's like, why in the world did we do that? We have created this mess by passing that law. Don't these people do any investigating into the ramifications of any of these bills that they pass? And we have health care that's a total disaster. How did they decide to write this law before they investigated the long-term effect or other laws?
Well, I think it was the President's Chief of Staff, Rahm Emanuel, and I disagree with what he said. He said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. That's what he said. Now, he said that, and I think he used that as a pretext to pass some very big bills. And I'll give you an example. I was invited to the White House to meet with Rahm Emanuel and others. It was actually Rahm Emanuel back in shortly after President Obama was sworn in, and it was the day before the first stimulus vote, okay, in the House. And you know, we want to know, how do you feel about this? I was among 12 House Republican members at the meeting, and basically it was conveyed to Rahm, I and others, that we had both policy and procedural concerns with this. And I said, you know, here we are to talk about the stimulus bill, and the bill is already written. At that time it was around, I think, 1,300 pages long. I said there will be no opportunity to amend this thing. So I have questions about how they're spending the money. It looks like it's just a typical Washington appropriations bill, except on steroids. That's what's happened here. And I said, now we're being asked to vote for it tomorrow. But knowing that there's no opportunity to amend this thing, we're told it has to be done this week, or or the world as we know it won't, will be forever changed. And I said, that's been part of the problem. It's not just the policy, it's the process used to enact this policy. And that's just one example. I was again invited down to the White House back in May of '09 to talk about any number of issues, and the President even came into the meeting, and the health care issue came up, and I recommended some very strong medical liability reforms. And before I got a few sentences into it, Rahm Emanuel stopped and said, "Charlie, don't worry, we're going to do medical liability reform." I said, "Well, Rahm, that's terrific. What do you want to do?" And he told me he wanted to do some like medical liability courts. And I said, "That's all good, Rahm. I'll support you on that aspect. I won't save you much money, but it's good policy." And just wanted to be clear. I have some other ideas for you. I went into some details about emergency rooms, trauma centers, and that sort of thing. And he said, "No, we're going to do something on this issue of medical liability." Well, the bill came up in the House, and it was presented to the full House. There was nothing in it on medical liability reform. Nothing. Zero. And then they actually put in like 3 pages a little later, in a later iteration of it. It basically took us backwards on liability reform. Said if you had imposed caps on non-economic damages, or if you had limited contingency fees to trial attorneys, that you would not be eligible for federal funding for various state pilot programs on medical liability reform. I said, you might as well do nothing. I mean, this is what happened. But the point is, I thought I was offering good substantive input. I mean, it was meaningful, it was sincere. I wasn't playing any games. And it was ignored. Okay.
Yeah, but didn't the lobbyists do that? Didn't they go in there and they push so hard they don't want any of that to happen because they'll all lose money, so they had to take it out so that people who are influenced by the lobbyists will vote for it?
The trial lawyers' lobby was very influential with the administration and those who wrote the bill. I mean, this is the other problem. This is the other problem, though. The other problem, though, is that the plan, the president didn't present stimulus legislation or a health care bill. He outsourced the drafting of the legislation to Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And on the stimulus, the president, when he presented the stimulus to the American people, he said he wanted something timely, targeted, and temporary, with some tax cuts and an emphasis on infrastructure. There was agreement to those broad principles. The problem was the legislation did not reflect the principles that he outlined. He handed off the drafting of this to the Speaker. She went to her appropriations chair, David Obey, who is now retiring, by the way, and he basically went to his subcommittee chairs on appropriation, and they put together their lists, and they basically spent money on things that Washington typically spends money on, except this time on steroids, and they called it stimulus. They said this is for infrastructure. $27 billion out of $862 billion is for roads and bridges. $27 billion. That was the infrastructure piece. Okay. So I think there's a cynicism. Back to the question, though, there's a cynicism out there. People are not only looking at the policies being enacted But the